Same to you. You okay? Same problem. You got a right knee? Right knee? Well, on my Achilles, I snapped it playing racket. Southeast Asia had a big league all over the
carrying this meeting today, so. Because Councilman Moreno is out of town, so I believe we start these meetings with your statement. Is that correct? Ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Well, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. We would like to thank everyone for your undivided attention and request that everyone listen and pay close attention so we can stick to the main issues that need attention to move this process forward. For us, this is a matter of absolute needs to ensure we can safely and finally move into healthy homes of our choice. As residents of Garden Plaza, who are still to this day impacted directly by our homes being on top of a hazardous waste landfill, we are fighting for a fully funded relocation. Our demand remains the same. One, a fully funded relocation at the full replacement cost had our homes not been built on toxic soil by the city of New Orleans, not a devalued amount. Two, moving expenses to honor our right to live in healthy homes of our choice without having to incur any debt as a result. Number three, this must occur before and prior to any future project or construction begins to ensure our safety, our health, and our dignity as human beings, particularly during this time of an ongoing global health pandemic of COVID, while many of us are already immune compromised. During the last Garden Plaza Task Force meeting, which was Tuesday, November 15th, we left clear that we need the following to transpire. Our demands, they call on the administration and both the private law firm and the City of New Orleans Legal Department to focus on being solution-oriented. We need an end to any and all antagonistic treatment toward us and our situation. We demand to be treated with dignity and respect, which is why when we are met with a disregard for our lives or our situation, we will resist such. We demand that the hired appraiser, Jim Thorns, not make decisions that result in devaluation nor discrimination. Just because the law requires an appraisal, it does not mean we have to accept devaluation nor discriminatory practices. And because appraisals have a history of being used in discriminatory ways, we demand that the concerns regarding the appraisal that was done as sample property for Machina and concerns be addressed on the front end. These need to be resolved. There is a material impact on the outcome of the appraisal, which the City of New Orleans is using to base its offer for the purchase of our houses and our land. We demand that these be addressed, and we have presented our concerns both verbally and in writing, and have provided support for such with the ARC letter that was shared. The sample appraisal brought up many questions regarding choice of neighborhood for comparisons, choice of homes in a flood zone, when Garden Plaza is not even in a flood zone. That fact that our homes in Garden Plaza, they are also made of brick entirely, and not brick veneer, which can result in a 6 to 7% price difference, sometimes up to 10%, depending upon who is doing the appraisal. So before we proceed forward with today's meeting, we would like to list what we demand needs immediate attention, because we demand resolve for and before the holiday. Number one, as residents of Garden Plaza, we demand that the previous sample appraisal be revisited and updated to prevent devaluation and discriminatory practices impacting outcomes for us as residents of Garden Plaza, as agreed upon during the last Garden Plaza Task Force meeting. Number two, as soon as we feel that our request has been made or has been attended to with this sample appraisal, and Ms. Sheena is satisfied with the process and the outcome, then we are certain the rest of our community will have some sense of confidence that their concerns, which are shared in this case, will be attended to on the front end to address concerns about devaluation and discriminatory practices. Number three, as residents of Garden Plaza, we demand the immediate next steps for the plan for ease of access regarding the relocation cost. To ensure that they can move without incurring debt. Number four, as residents of Garden Plaza, we demand that these transpire and are worked upon as priorities to resolve before the holiday, so that residents can finally safely move into healthy homes of their choice. The residents of Garden Plaza can only begin to secure new homes by actually having the necessary funds to do so. Number five, as residents of Garden Plaza, we demand that this entire process regarding funds distribution be resolved before the close of the 2022 calendar year. Number six, we also demand to prevent the calendar year from closing without resolve, that we do what we have consistently request be done, which is to schedule the next Garden Plaza Task Force meeting before the close of this current meeting. Number seven, and as a reminder, we demand that the City of New Orleans administration in all hostile engagement with us and direct all service providers engaged in this process now and soon to come that impact us in any way to prioritize non-devaluation and non-discrimination, whether it be the appraiser or the title company or the bank. This also pertains to all elected, appointed, and hired officials on behalf of the City of New Orleans. We say time and time Again, we will resist even when Black people are using the same tools, discriminatory tools or practices against their own Black people. These are the ways in which environmental racism can persist. And we demand that these practices end, because when they persist, we have no choice but to resist them and fight for what we know is necessary to honor our lives and meet our needs to ensure a healthy quality of life.
Is typically these meetings are driven by the residents. So I'm kind of looking to y'all as far as the format. I know typically Angela comes up and kind of does the run of show. So I'm looking for your guidance here. Unless Councilmember Thomas, do you want to add anything at this time? Okay. We're here to listen.
Okay, so everyone is very clear. This is not a show or a performance. This is a serious meeting where we need serious outcomes to be accomplished. Ms. Monique has given the rundown. And in the spirit of moving this meeting forward and moving this process forward, we're going to stick to those things, and we'd like to move through them as smoothly as possible. So the first one is acknowledgement. Thank you, Mr. Thorns, for being here today. We want to literally pick up from where we left off with the last meeting, which was your indication that the appraisal could be revisited, that it was not a decision that was coming out down from the sky, from God, that it could be something that could be relooked at. You had indicated that you needed the information that was sent over to Mr. Montano. Miss Marilyn re-forwarded that information again, made sure that it was sent to you. But just as a reminder, it's the exact same information that Ms. Sheena read to you out loud on October 31st, and also information that was reinforced again through the ARC letter that was provided. So we really just need to know what is going to be different and how that appraisal will be updated accordingly, because we understand, according to CAO Montano, that the city of New Orleans is prepared to pay out the highest amount possible that is under the legal expectations. And even though the appraisal is a part of the law, just because the appraisal is part of the law does not mean that the residents have to tolerate or accept devaluation or discriminatory practices. So we want to make that distinction. And we thank you for indicating that you would revisit it. So we just want to hear what's going to be different.
Mr. Thorne?
Yes, sir. First of all, there is no discrimination whatsoever on my part as it relates to an appraisal, whether here or any place else. I want to go on the record to be sure that people understand that. I have been in the appraisal business for over 40 years, and I've never been accused of any discrimination. And I am regulated by my license to ensure that I'm not, if anyone breaks up the accusation that I have. So let's deal with the letter that was written to Mr. Montano, President Helena Marino, Vice President J.P. Morrell, dated October 28th. And there are a total of 6 items on there, of which I will address. Starting off with the appraisal that I did is, and at the request of the city, for the purpose of establishing a value of the property for which they will make an offer to the homeowner to purchase. Secondly, flood zones is not an appraisal criteria. We don't select comparables based on whether they have a flood zone or not. Gordon Plaza is in a flood zone, just like the rest of the city. Some areas are have higher elevations than other, but the entire city is basically in a flood zone. It's 5 feet below sea level, and it has a levee around it. And save for the fact that there was a levee around it, I'm sure we would always all be wet during the rains and hurricanes and that sort of stuff. So I want to put that on the record. No adjustment, no indication of flood zones is a part of the appraisal, except to indicate which flood zone the property is in. The subject property is in a flood zone, and it's in the appraisal. The second one has to do with brick homes. I can tell you without the possible contradiction that the houses in New Orleans, for the most part, 99% are wood frame houses, and they have a veneer exterior, whether that veneer is brick or whether it is vinyl or other types of siding. They all are wood frame and veneer covering on the outside. That's not to say that there are not buildings in New Orleans that are not solid brick. An example of a solid brick building would have been the projects that were torn down. And the reason they were torn down because they were solid brick buildings and they could not be modified. And that's why they was torn. That's one of the reasons why they were torn down. The selection of comparables is an appraisal process by which the appraiser has to identify a location or locations that have the similar economics of the subject location. For instance, in Gordon Plaza, there is a consideration for what kind of economics would be there if it was not impaired, and it is impaired, and that consideration will come up as my next point. But Gordon Plaza is impaired. The selection of comparables must come from an unimpaired location, unimpaired, and where there is sufficient data that can be analyzed and used as comparables. The comparables in the appraisal report that I use as to whether or not they were in a flood zone or not. At the end of this process, when an appraisal is made and the city receives it and they make an offer on it, the seller of the property, if they so choose to sell, can go anywhere they want to buy a property of whatever they want to buy. That's their choice, whether it's in a flood zone or not. Now, the mitigation for flood zones, which most of the city of New Orleans is taken care of through FEMA, the federal government, and flood insurance. So most people have flood insurance of some sort, and the elevation of the property that they're in will decide. Now, one of the mitigating factors for flood is to raise the houses. They're raised on piers. That is one of the issues that is done. All of the comparables that I use were raised. They were raised above flood level. And the builder of those properties had to come to City Hall and had to present a flood map and flood elevation before they could have been given a permit to build it. So flood is not an issue. They're not subject to flooding based upon the current information that's available, published by FEMA and regulated by the city permits office. So I want to be very clear about that part. The rationale for neighborhoods. We're not choosing a neighborhood for anybody to go to. You choose your own neighborhood, you go wherever you want. We're choosing areas for the comparables that have the same profile as the subject. And I mean profile, I mean the type of houses, the ages of houses, that sort of thing. The kinds of inhabitants and that sort of thing, the economics of that. There is no discrimination in that. There is none. And I can't find it, although it's been indicated on a number of times. The next point is land value. Land value is included as a part of the whole property that is used as comparable. There is no separate land value evaluation. whether it be unimpaired or impaired. There is no separate land value. Studies will show that there are thousands of lots that have been sold in the city of New Orleans, sold by Nora and others in the city. And those lots range from somewhere around $6,000 up to probably around $30,000 on the average. So that is not an issue in this because land value is built in, it's a part of the whole property valuation. The sources of data. The sources of data for the appraisals come from builders who build properties in the city of New Orleans. The multiple listing system, which is operated by the realtors. There are lots of sales included that are not realtor involved that are included on the assessor's database. And go look for yourself. There are sales that are there to take place. They are published sales and they're documented. There are titles, deeds, if you may want to call it, in the city records that support and confirm what sales took place and how much they were sold for. There is a Louisiana commercial database, which has information about land values and about sales of properties. So those are the sources of sales. Every week in the Times-Picayune, they publish sales of houses in New Orleans. That's a guide. It's not a confirmation, it's only a guide. The information that's published in the multiple listing system is a guide, it's not confirmation. The confirmation process comes for the appraiser is when he receives an indication that a property has been sold, that he confirmed that through reviewing the titles and the sale. That's how we know what's sold. So with that in mind, I can't address the other issues in this document as it relates to moving expenses, because that's not a part of the appraisal. The issue of that was included in the ARC letter that I received, or as if the appraisal was being done for the individual, and that individual was going to a lender to borrow money. That is not the case. What's being done here is an appraisal, same data, but the appraisal is being written for the city at the city's request, so that it can make a decision about the value of the property, so that it can negotiate with the owner of the property for acquisition. And that's it.
Would you like to respond, Angela?
Yes, we just want to go on record as indicating that all of those things that Mr. Thorne has just shared are things that he has shared in past meetings. And we say again that even though you continue to say that there are no discriminatory practices or no devaluation happening, we want to go on record as saying that appraisals and the tools you use and the decisions that you make is what opens up the devaluation and the discriminatory practices. So we get an opportunity to hear your rationale for the decisions that you've made and the rationale that you have shared for these decisions are not acceptable when you say things like, everybody that lives in New Orleans just lives in a flood zone, so it's not acceptable. It doesn't matter. It does matter, because there are material impacts, there are prices, and there are variations in expense depending on where you live in Orleans Parish. If that were the case, people would not have a vast variation of insurance, which you mentioned today, because the residents of Gordon Plaza live in an ex-flood zone. They do not live in a flood zone. And that has to be taken into consideration, because to be randomly dismissive about that is an example of what we mean when we talk about discriminatory practices. Right. The other part that's really important to this is that when you say it's not discriminatory because you pick neighborhoods that are considered to be like neighborhoods, what is the thing that makes that neighborhood the same? We know at the end of the day, when we look at where these houses are, they fall into categories that are easily obvious to recognize, which are Black neighborhoods that have been in red line zones prior to, and it just so happens to be each of those comparables fall into a flood zone. You were asked before by Council President Moreno, what is the difference? Why could you not have chosen even homes in Gentilly Terrace versus Gentilly Woods? You did not answer that question. So we know, according to the National Fair Housing Alliance on Pennsylvania Avenue, they indicated on November 2nd that regardless to whether or not an individual appraiser thinks that they are being devaluative or being discriminatory, the tools that you use, the decisions that you make, no matter if it's a Black person, white person, male, female, gender identity, it does not matter. What we are telling you is if you're using tools that devalue or criteria that devalues, the outcomes are going to be devalued and the practices are going to be discriminatory. So we're coming to you again to say that that rationale that everybody living in New Orleans is just in one big old flood zone, that's not acceptable because the insurance companies would not say the same. So that's number one. Would you like me to go on?
It would be better if I could address the
Go
issue
ahead.
as we go
I
forward
welcome it. Go ahead.
and not try to run all of these things together.
I mean, I just want to ask the question because, you know, you went through all yours at one time. So go ahead. I would like for you to address it and thank you for doing so.
As far as I know, and I know this for a fact, that Gentilly Woods is a racially mixed neighborhood, and so is Pontchartrain Park. So I don't need to. You can simply look yourself and go out and drive, and you'll find out that that's the case. The same. If you're going to listen to what I have to say, you're going to have to be respectful. I'm trying to be respectful to you. Let's be respectful to each other. Just be respectful.
Everyone, let's give them a chance to respond. And then Angela will have her opportunity to respond as well. But let's try and keep the meeting moving along. Angela, if you feel like you have to ask a question in between, just like Mr. Thorne felt the need to ask you something, just
Well,
let me know.
thank you for that. Were you done, Mr. Thorns, on that one?
No, I'm not.
Okay, go ahead.
The neighborhood that she mentioned, which is right there in Gentilly between, I guess, Franklin Avenue and the lake and Gentilly, that sort of stuff. Those areas have the same composition in terms of makeup as Gentilly Woods and Pontchartrain Park. They have new houses that are being built there. The racial makeup is similar.
Actually, so just not to, I very seldom, and I will try to interject as much as possible. I used to live in Gentilly Terrace. Gentilly Terrace is a historic neighborhood. There are very few new homes built in Gentilly Terrace. Yeah, I'm merely saying that's point correction. In Pontchartrain Park, Gentilly Woods, there's a tremendous amount of new construction because that entire area was inundated by water. I think the point that the brother's trying to make was that I had a home. I used to live at 4645 Music Street. It did not flood during Katrina because it was on Gentilly Ridge. And so many of the homes, if you go from Mirabeau to Gentilly Boulevard, many of those homes did not flood because they were on a natural ridge. So I think as far from the residents' perspective, what they were trying to say is, though certainly the city's in the floodplain, I now live in Vista Park where my house is 8 feet in the air because that area, when we were building the house, they said it got 8 feet of water, so you got built to 8 feet. My former house, which is still at Music Street, is not elevated because it was on the ridge. So I think the point they were trying to make as far as the comparable between Gentilly Woods versus Gentilly Terrace, that Gentilly Terrace, because of the elevation of the property, naturally, there was no flooding. I don't know, and I can't tell you, I tried to look up on my phone and I do not know, so I'm not an expert on flood maps. I do not know, because I couldn't tell you, because I now pay for a flood zone property, if there is a quantification as far as your flood insurance based upon location. Mr. Thorne may be correct and may just blanket the whole city as you're in a flood zone, and I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I'm just articulating, I think what your point was that if you're on naturally raised land versus not naturally raised land, your requirements to elevate differ greatly based upon your base elevation from the floodplain. So I know from my new house, which is in Vista Park near Robert E. Lee, my house is literally 6-7 feet in the air because that was the Contrita floodwater level. Whereas my previous house in Gentilly Terrace is not elevated at all because it did not flood at all during Katrina. So just wanted to put that as a point of information.
Okay,
Um,
I'm finished.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something else, Mr.
You
Thorne?
said it was finished. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Angie.
And for CAO Montano, I appreciate the fact that you're here and we're having this discussion together, because these are the kinds of discussions that end up having this kind of back and forth when the rationale for the justification for revisiting that to do something different because it has a material impact. These are the things we're talking about. When the National Fair Housing Alliance came out with their press release based on substantial research that's been done over decades, what they indicated is when it comes to issues of discriminatory practices, it can be so challenging for people who are individuals in isolation contending with appraisers this way, because what ends up happening is it can be so hard for people to prove the discriminatory practices. So what we did not want to have happen today is people just say discriminatory without being able to name with specificity the concrete material differences between somebody saying, oh yeah, you live in a flood zone versus not, because there are actual material outcomes connected to that. Now, as it relates to the choice of the actual homes, not only have they been chosen within a flood zone, the question is about the houses that have been selected, such as the full entire brick homes, and understanding that in addition to them not being in a flood zone, they sit on 24-inch thick cement slabs that increase the value of their homes. So when you do those kind of comparisons, it's significant. But we believe that if you took a deeper dive into the world of the MLS access that you should have, well, let me stop. Do you have access to MLS?
Yes, I do.
You have access to MLS?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you stand by that on public record?
I do.
Okay. Okay. So with that being said, we believe that if you were to revisit MLS and look at the vast majority of homes that exist within the city, because even just as lay people out here who don't have expertise like you do, when we go online, we can find homes that look like Machina's homes, full brick, and those homes are listed anywhere between $650,000.
Sure.
So we're asking you to revisit MLS that you have access to, that you've said on public record you have access to identify these other homes in terms of comparables, because just jumping over to Gentilly Woods and saying, I'm just going to jump over to Pontchartrain Park, I'm just going to look at that one area, is not suffice for what we know is actually achievable by law if you would broaden your lens. So we want to name that. And we think that that's more than fair, CAO Montano, because we're here today to say that the residents are actually super ready to say, hey, we're ready for these appraisals, but you gotta know that it only makes sense that people would have a sense of confidence that something that's this clearly being named be taken into consideration when the appraisals are being done. And even though people could say, well, if you don't like the appraisal, you get appraisal. Here's the thing. You're basically asking residents of Gordon Plaza to sign off and just say, hey, we're going to move forward and allow these things to be negated, when this is not only a representation of them, it's a representation of what we've named again from the National Fair Housing Alliance that these are the kind of practices that result in people getting appraisals, that result in offers based on appraisals that come back low and put people in situations that they should not be in. So the goal is to be proactive, because since everybody around here cares about the law and doing things right, we are sounding the alarm to say that the appraisal, which is a part of the law, that be done correctly as well. I want to say also, just to complete out the list, you indicated that the land was just in there together, but we do not see within the appraisal the line item that indicates what was included in terms of the land. What we do see is that for the Marshall and Swift report that's in the back, it's just detached back there, but it's not included. And so the things that you're talking about like the houses, the brick houses and all those, that is once again why the meeting was established with the replacement cost analysis team, because replacement costs keeps you from having to say, I can't see a comparable, because comparables open up the door for discriminatory practices when you can't find something. But what we know removes the barrier of discriminatory practices and saying, hey, this is how much these materials, these brick materials would cost. This is how much it would cost if we were building this home today. That is what we call fairness.
Let me address that, Angela, at that point. So I can be more specific. The comparables used in Machina's house were brand new construction, never been lived in, brand new. And the sale that took place between the contractor and the purchaser included the land. So, and so that purposely was done to eliminate the issue of trying to segregate land from building. That is not necessary. The whole property, the land and the building, sold for what is indicated in that appraisal. Okay, so sir, here's some good news today, because I want to keep the spirit of the meeting going forward, but everything we're saying we're dead serious about. The good news is that once again, we're coming back to lay out things for your consideration, because the problem is, and I want you to really listen to what you just said, okay? The problem is when we talk about replacement costs, we are saying, sir, hey, without considering anything else, as I examine Machina's home and I recognize what the home is built out of, what the house, all those kind of things, I can take into consideration the calculation of all that would be involved to rebuild that home again today. But when you say, and I actually appreciate that you looked at brand new homes, but if you're looking at a home that's made out of brick versus a house that's made out of wood or brick veneer, clearly there's going to be a difference. The problem is when you say, I have examined this other home, it's brand spanking new, you should just go with this thing. What you're saying is the calculation of your appraisal is based on the house you saw, not the house that Machina lives in. And that's a problem, because that aligns with the discriminatory practices around, guess what, Machina, when you get this money, here's 3 houses that look like something you can move into. So that's not how we're gauging, ensuring that Machina, listen carefully, can purchase a home, a healthy home of her choice, not the 3 homes you listed as comparables. That's a significant difference. And it would totally be unfair to say, hey, Machina, I gave you 3 comparables of 3 brand new houses. Therefore, you should be happy, because what you're inevitably saying to Machina is that when you get your money, you pick between one of these 3 houses. That's not what this is. That's not what this process is. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up these last couple of points, because CAO Montano, in the last meeting, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am that those of you who are present, because when y'all miss meetings,
When you're present, thank you for being present, we get an opportunity to keep moving this forward. We are asking the city of New Orleans, who hired the private law firm who brought on Mr. Thorns, to direct him to not engage in this hear us very concretely around the things we're talking about, because I promise you, if you read the press release from the National Fair Housing Alliance and you look at the actual research connected to it, you would understand how discriminatory practices take place. And this is an opportunity this is actually a gift that the residents of Gordon Plaza are giving to the city of New Orleans, because while everybody's paying attention to this across the country, there's an opportunity for the city of New Orleans to actually get this right. So I'm gonna just wrap up by saying that, again, the land valuation of the $28,000 that you have calculated, and I'm not even gonna probe you today about how you came up with that number, sir. But that $28,000 that is on the Marshall and Swift page, if you were to subtract that $28,000 from the 358, you're basically saying that is how much the home would be worth. We're saying that we don't see how that fits in, and we understand that wherever you're valuing the land in terms of those comparables, that too is going to indicate what that dollar amount comes to. And so I just want to, I could do this all day and keep going, but what I'm going to ask you to do is go into your MLS system that you have access to, that you've named on public record that you do, so that it can give you the vast range of the things you need to tap into, which CAO Montano, we promise and understand is fully in accordance with the law.
I don't see any responses from that. I will say, I do think, and I don't know how we resolve this, there certainly is a challenge in that there is a valuation of the property and evaluation of the land. And the challenge you have is that under no matter what metric you value the land, if you take the property itself and you move it around the city, there has to be an acknowledgement that any piece of land in the city is more than $28,000. And so the challenge is, even if you believe a house, let's say, is worth $330,000, less the value of the house, if you're going to buy a house somewhere else and the land is factored into it, then inevitably you're going to get less house because you're buying the land with the same property. So, I mean, there has to be some way for us to give quantification.
Listen,
value in a house versus the property the house is on, because otherwise, if you're just taking the value of the house and plopping it around, and you have to factor in the cost of land, you're basically looking for a house. If you're if 368,000 with a valuation of the house around 330, that means after you go buy a $330,000 house somewhere else, the land factor, and you're actually buying $150,000, $200,000 house versus the value of your house. So I am not an appraiser. I think it's something we hear what you're saying, and we're going to have conversations about that, because we have to figure out some way to put a value to that. But I think it's a legitimate concern.
And we want to, and we can go on record today just to help with this again, is to name what we believe are easy, seamless next steps that can be taken, because as soon as these issues are at least taken seriously, CAO Montano, okay, then we know that the rest of the residents can have some confidence. Because this right here, I want you just to imagine, CAO Montano, this right here would be what would be happening for 67 different property owners who are standing by a justifiable truth that has to be contended with. And we could just get it right with Ms. Sheena, set the tone. And the good news is, again, even the stuff that you're talking about now, Councilman Morale, is that is why in December of 2021, the replacement cost analysis report, not an appraisal report, was provided to the city of New Orleans to say, hey, if you got questions about methodology, you have wonderings about how these calculations are to come about, because maybe these aren't the way that you all have been able to envision it look like, even though these are tools that appraisers can use, and you've acknowledged that, it's already provided for your consideration. But
So-
even
so
if
am
you
I to
don't use the
understand?
same,
I mean, let me ask, am I to understand that if the appraisals does not meet this appraisal from Tulane, then it's unacceptable? Is that
no,
what I'm
this is
hearing?
what we're saying.
Is that what you're saying?
What we have provided, listen. I want you to be super clear. Because you brought up three things that don't have anything to do with your scope of responsibility. So I don't even need you to carry that weight. The only thing we are asking you to care for, sir, is to engage in the process of facilitating this appraisal without devaluation and discriminatory practices. And the reason I keep saying that, the city of New Orleans should count and thank the residents of Gordon Plaza, because this is saying there's an opportunity to get this right on the front end and not be haphazard with people's lives. The reason this part is so important with the land, Councilman Morrell, is because we don't want to forget, and I know that sometimes people don't hear everything the residents say because they don't be listening, is that when they actually purchased their homes to begin with, the city of New Orleans sold the home, the house, and sold the land separately. They paid they didn't pay one thing and move in. And so they are dead set on making sure, and listen to me carefully, they're dead set on making sure that they're not getting cheated in terms of the land value, because they actually paid for land and are still paying taxes on this land that has caused havoc and resulted in the death of family members. And to this day, it's still causing people pain and havoc. This could be addressed.
And I can address that. When the properties were built in Gordon Plaza, they all sold for around $42,000. With a soft second of $5,000 that were forgiven in 5 years. So in retrospect, the houses sold for $37,000 and the land was given to the property owner. That's what the records show.
I want to say again, this is what we mean about this. This is what we mean about discriminatory practices. Because even if the residents of Gordon Plaza in, let's say, 1981 purchased their homes for $10,000, that ain't got shit to do with the fact that in 2022, when a person sells a home or goes through an appraisal process, see, when you put that out, that's what we recognize as you throwing shade.
Right. Right. And trying to be.
It does not matter.
And trying to be.
It does not matter.
Be political about
Hey,
things.
I want to be, I have no more to say. I don't know what else is.
So we need to move on.
Are you done with questions?
The only request that we have, and I want to name them before Mr. Thorne has to depart. Because whatever challenges you're feeling right now, Mr. Thorne, I just want to tell you, it does not in any way, shape, or form even compare to what the residents have had to contend with.
I am not feeling any challenges. I'm not feeling.
Actually, despite what people are feeling right now, you are getting the patient version of us today. And I don't even know how that's possible. We're asking everybody to get out of your personal feelings
Guys,
and let's focus on
guys,
the business at hand.
let Angela speak. Part of us trying to have this dialogue is that Angela's speaking for the group. If you have something that you want to have Angela say on your behalf, come talk to her, but it's hard to keep the dialogue flowing when people yell at interjections.
I
So,
want to
go ahead.
say, Councilman, the issue is actually not the residents. The residents are not going to respond the way they do unless they're being dismissed. So let's check ourselves here. Because they've asked me to come up here to help move a thing forward, because it could be really havoc in here. And so if all we're doing is having a conversation, there's no need, because we know to this day, there's some council people not in here because they might be in there. We're focused. We're focused. So with that being said, we're asking for these things to be revisited, tapping into the MLS access that is had, understanding that land value is a thing, and it needs to be taken seriously in 2022, because in a sneeze, it's about to be 2023. And that is not only fair, it's justifiable, and it is a part of the demand that the residents have. So what we would ultimately like to have happen to expedite this along, because whatever Mr. Thorns is feeling right now, he don't have to keep feeling this. This could be resolved, and then the rest of the residents can have an opportunity to move on and have their appraisals done. The rest of the residents would be able to contend with this. Because the other thing is, we would hate for the city of New Orleans to have to go through this 60-something times more when we could just get it right on the front end. So that's the request.
Okay, if there are no more questions from Mr. Thorne, he's asked to be excused. So I will excuse you at this time, Mr. Thorne.
And will you just make sure to loop back with him so that he is fully aware of the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, because we would like him to be.
We will loop back in with him. We'll also make sure, as you've been very good about doing, Angela, if you could send us a lot of your questions, follow up.
We have, Councilmember, we've already sent those things. We've articulated them again today. It is imperative that we have action taken on them, because really what should have happened today, which would have made most sense, is he would have come in here, not saying the same things he said before, but actually considering those things that have already been named in writing.
Yeah.
We do have other business to attend to, but the point I want to say is that this part right here could be done and over with if this part would just be taken seriously. Because here's the thing, the mail in Gordon Plaza is running, and we're on the way over here once again, and there's a letter in the mail from Chair Gardner. We're sitting up in this meeting, even though we indicated in the last meeting that all we needed was for Mr. Thorne to address these things that he said he would. We're back here again, and now there's a letter in the mail from Chair Gardner.
Can we get a copy of that letter?
Absolutely, because it's asking the residents to say, basically, just trust what's been done in Machina and let it happen to you. And we're saying, Mr. Thorne should be able just to follow through with what he said in the last meeting, revisit this with what has been reinforced once again in today's meeting, so that these appraisals can come back and offers can be made. Because it's smooth sailing after that. But not when people feel, justifiably so, based on material conditions, that they are being cheated. It'd be foolish for them to be quiet about that.
Okay, we'll
And
get
they are not
we'll
going
get
to be
a
quiet
copy of the
about
letter from Angela. Thank you, Mr. Thorne.
Thank you,
We'll
Mr.
go to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, let's go on. Go ahead.
Mr. Thorne, before Mr. Thorne leaves,
Mr. Thorne, real quick.
before you leave, I've listened very carefully to what your responses, and you went back and forth. You didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You talked about the flood, but I want to go back to several meetings prior to this, when I personally asked you, had you any involvement in Garden Plaza when those homes were built, and you stated, and it's on public records, no. Today you broke down exactly what happened when those homes were built. I need some clarification on that.
Yes, you, not no public record.
I know it's on public record. Okay, right, but your name is, also addressed the fact that your name was signed to a lot of those properties back there as appraisal. Okay, so maybe we'll have to bring the papers in.
Properties that anyone when they originally sold, I did not.
But you appraised them afterwards. Okay, very, very close afterward. And Mr. Montana, Councilman Morrell, Cheryl, we coming in here, Angela, every week with the same statements, with the same outcome.
It ain't moving forward.
It's not moving forward. And we are stagnated. And we're tired. We are really tired. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of the other residents. Let us move forward, please. Let us move forward with the city say we have to have an appraisal. Why can't all of the houses have to gonna be torn down? All of the houses have no specific value at all. They're not gonna be sold to anyone except the city. Why not have one blanket amount of money that was done in that analysis and let us move on with our lives? Please, we worked hard, as I stated before. We want to live comfortable and in peace. I am not in peace, and it is a turmoil. My life is in a turmoil because of something I've worked hard for. How would you all feel if your homes were put in this particular situation and right now in your life, Councilman Moreno, I'm sorry, Morrell, you said you had to raise your house 7 feet. How would you feel if you were in a situation?
When I built my house, it was built 8 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So I
yeah,
didn't have to raise it, but it was built 8 feet in the air.
Yeah. So, but how would you feel that you can't do nothing in your home and not be comfortable in your home, in your own home that you worked hard for?
One day, day after day after day. Also raising houses in New Orleans, that's fine and good. We understand because of the flood. But when you over 70 years old, you do not have the stamina, the legs, the muscle to walk up and down steps. You don't have it. I understand why he did the appraisal, but I don't understand what's the listing. How could he not give us land? When you bought your home, didn't they pay you for land? Didn't you have a measurement of how just like he did for the house, and so many dollar amount for the land for each square footage of your land?
No, I mean, I think that's a valid point y'all brought up today. I think it has to be addressed because there has to be an acknowledgement that if we're doing replacement costs for the house, we have to deal with the land situation. I think just to reiterate, the whole rationale why we have to do the appraisals is because of the state constitutional requirement without properties purchased. So if there was not a constitutional requirement, we could do something different. To your point, I do think there is an ongoing conversation that needs to happen around valuing replacement cost of the physical property versus the land. I'll tell you, for example, if you have insurance on your house, you get replacement costs and your insurance is based upon the replacement cost of the physical property. They don't give you replacement costs on the land because the idea is the land's still going to be there at the same value. So, I mean, I think it's a valid concern. It's something that's going to have to be addressed, and we are listening to you, and we're going to have a conversation about that.
Yes, because we are tired. I don't know. I can speak just like Ms. Lewina said for all of the residents of Gordon Plaza. We are over 70 years old, most of us. We have maybe 2 people who are under 70. We're tired. We've had enough. What can be done to get rid of the Jim Thorne and the legal team who's not helping us to move forward? This is long overdue. And the sooner the city buys us out, the sooner the city can make some money. So they need to go ahead. The money has already been allocated. They should need to go ahead and distribute it. And I want to know who can get rid of these people who are supposedly holding us hostage. The legal team, Jim Thorne, they need to go. They need to go. We've done most of the work for the city. Everything we've done was positive and could move this forward. So who's to say we can't go and get our own team to distribute our funds so we can move? We want a better quality of life. We are over 70 years old, all of us. Please, please do something about that. Get rid of that team. We can get y'all a team together. We've done great things so far with the residents of Gordon Plaza to get this far. So somebody has to do something. Something, please do something. Get rid of these people who are holding us hostage. We're tired. Enough is enough. We need a better quality of life now. Now, right now.
What's up? As you hear my mother and the rest of the residents say, we're talking about anti-discriminatory policies. We were talking about anti-Blackness, but as you see now, some of the things that Mr. Thorns did not consider was age discrimination and walking upstairs and rebuilding a home, and some of the things that these older people who are the homeowners are not able to do. House of choice, right? And how is it that this man comes and he presents before us? We ask him, like, what is going to be different, and we show him the fair housing press release that comes out that clearly shows that this is a problem that has been happening in this country. And this man comes in front of these people and has the audacity to not even consider what is coming from a legitimate organization and being very dismissive to these people. Now, what we know is that Share Garner is in the pocket of the city. The city goes to Share Garner to do whatever they need them to do. What we also know is Jim Thorns, we can look and see all of the associations that he's had when it comes to the city of New Orleans. So that's their go-to guy. That's your go-to guy to say, well, we need you to go do our bidding. And it's clear to the residents with the antagonistic behavior that Jim Thorns is unbiased, and his bias is towards the city of New Orleans. So as the city council, it is your responsibility to stop this from happening. Just as my mother stated, who's going to do something about it? If you're at a stalemate, these are your guys. Share Garner is your law firm. Jim Thorns is your person. Do we have to get our own people? Because if there's an authoritative body, it's you. It's you who oversee this. You're, Mr. Montano, you're from the administration. You're with the administration. You guys are with the city council. You're supposed to be representing the people. How are we gonna allow this man to come here and sit here and say the exact same thing when these residents who are asking, what's gonna be different? We have you. What's gonna be different? And you come in and you don't tell us anything that's gonna be different. And we move along with the discriminatory policies and the dismissive behavior and all of these things. So now we want to add age discrimination to it. And it's I really don't know what to say for the city of New Orleans. It makes me sad.
Hey, so I don't really know where my comment falls in at, but I know we're going back and forth with the appraisal, the fund, but I guess my biggest focus is the time. Me and my neighbor was just discussing our water issue. You already know about the sinkhole we had around some of my neighbors' home, but I'm one of the youngest homeowners because of my mother. I'm Sheena. I'm the one the appraisal was done for. But there's also an issue with sewage and water board. My water bill is currently over $16,000. Moulton, I live the next block from Moulton Elementary. Moulton was closed because of the pipe and lead. The pipes, I have to leave a hole in my driveway because that's how many times I have to get those pipes redone. It comes out of my pocket. I'm paying thousands of dollars because sewage and water board say it's on my property. Guess what? My property is on Exactly. So those pipes are really corroded down there and I'm continually fighting and struggling. As you can see, my appraisal, of course, was public. I'm fine with that. But I know you saw the sales tax. I had to decide whether I wanted to pay homestead exemption, what, roughly $1,700 I would pay each year for tax. I had to choose that or constantly pay $2,000 to $3,000 every so often just to keep my water on. So and both of these is something that has to come out of my pocket once this is all done. Once all this buyout, I still have a $16,000 water bill and I still got to pay these back taxes. So I'm just asking, can we kind of move on with this? This is my neighbors is going through a lot, but for me, my 2 kids, it's too much.
More than.
I shouldn't have to fight over land that's not worth nothing and water. I shouldn't even have to pay for pipes. That's not my fault.
That's right.
So I just wanted to make light of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheena.
So the residents are articulating concern after concern, all of which they have indicated prior to and since December of 2021. The only thing they asked last week is that the administration, supported by the council, direct this those issues so this can move forward. That is a simple request. Because you know that's not a thing that they brought up today that's not worthy of consideration.
And it's the federal government's money, not yours.
Item number 1 on here was really supposed to take us 5-10 minutes. Because he said in the last meeting he would come back and revisit it.
I
We're
was
here now.
at the last meeting, you're right. He did say that we gave him the list of concerns, that he would address the concerns. And I did leave slightly earlier than everybody else, but specifically, we talked about the brick veneer piece and whether or not that would be a reconsideration. And that was not addressed today.
The items that were in that letter were provided to you all and provided again to him. We are saying now, this right here is the interruption. It's not the residents. That is what's holding up the process. Because it is not within their realm to just accept anything. And we're not even talking about the law, because nobody's debating you about the law within what he's supposed to do. We're saying he's not doing it.
Get rid of it.
I'm gonna say this again. We're asking him to attend to those things. We're asking you all to direct him to attend to those things so that we can move forward.
I will talk to Councilmember Moreno, and I think that what is most appropriate this time is that we will specifically cite the issues that have been brought up repeatedly in writing and say that they must be addressed by next meeting.
Okay, so let's.
See if that promotes some movement. But that being said, I do think there's a larger concern. Like I said, I think I understood from my perspective what you were saying when you said Gentilly Woods versus Gentilly Terrace. Like I fully understood, like I said, from my own experience, you were talking about property that has historically flooded versus property that does not historically flood.
It's that simple, sir.
I get it. And I think that whether that's reflected on flood maps or not, I think for people in the city who have lived here as long as you have, everyone in the city knows where do you want to live if you don't want your house to get flooded during a rainstorm or get flooded, and where you want to live. And there's a value in that. There's certainly a value in people who are realtors in the city know if you live on a natural ridge, if you live on a high elevated area, whether it's reflected in your insurance or not, people pay a premium for property that historically does not flood. And I think that is the point y'all were trying to get across. And that was one of the points that was not addressed.
Okay, so we can move on from the side of the administration. Is that something that you're willing to follow up on, to ask him to do what he said he would do in the last meeting?
I'll work with a counselor on that. We just spoke on.
Can you come closer to the mic, sir? We can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Can you? I'll join the council members in that same request, discussing with the.
Okay, so that picks us up from number 2, going back to also what Machina said in terms of timeline. If that is addressed, even within his own timelines, for how long he would need, or any appraiser would need to engage the rest of the community, what that means to us, based on an actual timeline, all of this could be actually resolved by December 15th. I'm talking about all of it, like the appraisals, all of it. So if we worked backwards from there, that would mean the residents should get an update today about what's going on with their replacement costs, moving expenses process, because whatever around that still needs some technicality or to be attended to. That needs to be addressed with an intensity so that they can know that that's going to take place, to feel comfortable moving forward with this process here. These things are connected. So would you like to give an update on that? Relocation?
Relocation. So we have reached out, like I said, I talked to you previously, Angela. We've worked out to TCA. We reached out to Louisiana Fair Housing. They don't have the capacity to do it, but they did say they would, as they've been supportive of the residents of Gordon Plaza, they would lend their expertise towards crafting a process. We are still working through with not Shared Gardner, with the city legal department, as far as how we would structure that. We are going to be writing a written response shortly, coming from our counsel, our executive counsel from the council side, our lawyers, on trying to push that, have actual documentation going back and forth, pushing that process to say, we think that there needs to be resolution immediately. We think we've addressed a lot of the legal issues, but there have been several instances throughout the history of this city, as far back as Katrina, where third parties manage, for example, things like CBDG block grants. There's a history of being able to do something like this. We're just trying to get the nuts and bolts. From my perspective, like I said previously, the administration, as far as the non-legal department, has been consistent with the council that the relocation piece part needs to be addressed. The rental part needs to be addressed, because as we said previously, relocation costs includes moving costs and includes the need to potentially rent property in the interim, because there's no guarantee that when we do reach a price, let's say on appraisals, that someone who gets the appropriate value will be able to immediately move into a home of their choosing, or to even find a home, because as you know, the housing market is very tight right now. So that being said, so when we talk about relocation costs, it's the same idea we have with the anti-displacement fund, where you talk about the moving costs separately, as well as rent for a fixed period of time, a reasonable period of time. So somebody who can get out of a property that is unsafe will have somewhere safe to go while they look for another safe property to reside in. So we are continuing to work on that, and that's where it is.
Okay, so let's just move there so we can again move forward. Based on the buyout process and the relocation costs, we don't need to hear anymore from the city of New Orleans about this process being slowed down because of this process being illegal, because that's not true. And I want to go on record as saying that everything around replacement costs has been addressed. It's just not being used. Discriminatory practices, evaluation. There needs to be a directive to do the things that are within the wheelhouse here of the tools that the appraiser has. And if Jim Thorne cannot do it by himself, get him some help. We're done with that. Relocation costs with moving expenses. People out here talking about what's against the law or not. We've moved past the last couple of meetings. We understand that relocation cost is within the law. We understand that moving expenses is within the law. So we're moving past that. What we're hearing you say is that you all are working out the mechanism. That's going to happen. You're working out the mechanism by which to make it so that they don't have to experience red tape getting their money, because they have to be able to move. So let's bring it to where we are now, because the next question is gonna be, well, if it's not against the law, we can do it and everybody agrees, what's holding it up? I also hear you saying that this still has to be blessed somehow by the legal team.
Well, basically, the very pointed conversation is between our legal position and the legal department's position as to how permissible it is to do this. Our position is that it is permissible and should be done. Their position is, we think it's permissible, but we kind of have to be convinced.
Convinced by who?
Our position with our legal counsel, who will be setting an actual legal opinion, is that we think this absolutely should move forward, and that you need to tell us why it cannot in writing.
Okay, so what I hear you saying, because I want to be clear, I want to move through the smoke and the mirrors that might be out here, okay? What I hear you saying is that the legal team that not only works with the administration, but the council is putting together a legal justification.
No, to clear it up, the council has its own executive counsel, our own lawyer.
Got it.
Our lawyer is putting together his opinion as to why what we're proposing is absolutely legal and can go forward. We are doing that in an effort to push the ball forward forcibly to resolve this.
Okay, so
What we've been having up to this point is a dialogue back and forth of, we think it's legal, and the city attorney is saying, well, we kind of think it's legal, but we still are researching it. And basically, they're perpetually researching it. We're trying to push it past the research into an agreement so we can move forward on it. Because I will tell you from my perspective, just me as an individual council member, my focus and my effort, because I took that, as you know, back in September, is to resolve this thing, which I feel like I have agency and control over. I've been focusing my effort on resolving this. We as a group collectively, the residents of Gordon Plaza, the council as a whole, and the administration are trying to resolve the issue with the appraisals and the property. My office personally has been trying to resolve the relocation piece. So that's where I feel like, from my legal experience in my wheelhouse, that is something that I am intently focused on resolving, because as you and I have previously spoken, both have to be resolved before you can have a solution, because you have to be able to know what relocation and moving cost will be when you're determining whether or not you're going to take an appraisal to be moved out of your property. The two things have to happen simultaneously. So I'm focusing my efforts on addressing the relocation and rent piece. Personally, the council as a whole and the administration as a whole is dealing with the appraisal piece. But I feel very confident that the piece that I am working on intently will be resolved shortly.
okay, so what is the timeline then? Just the part that's within your control.
Within my control. So the next, we have a special meeting on Wednesday from 11:30 till 2:30 to resolve a variety of issues, including the Hano appointment that is in conflict right now. Looking at the calendar, I believe that special meeting is a full council meeting. So I think the most appropriate time to have the follow-up meeting would be that Wednesday when the whole council is here.
I want to also ask about how to proactively ensure people are not just showing up on Wednesday, having a conversation for the first time, that whatever gets attended to regarding the legal department, I'll just say the legal expert working with the council to present this to the private law firm and
not the private law firm, it's going to the city attorney's office.
Okay, but
This is the piece that I'm dealing with doesn't deal with Sheer Gardner. Just want to be clear.
you know,
Right.
and Cielo Montano. This legal from the council could break their neck, Mr. Montano, do this and present it to the city, whether it be Denisha or Corwin, whoever it's gonna be. But if all that happens only for them to turn to the private law firm, we need to make sure that all those conversations happen on Tuesday before Wednesday. Because we would hate for all this to happen come Wednesday, and then what's gonna happen is Wednesday, we're gonna throw up their hands and say, we're going to Thanksgiving. We need this part right here to be resolved before Wednesday to know that Wednesday is real. And we feel confident that that can happen because every single thing that's being talked about today was
To
actually
be
being-
clear, the full council meeting is next Wednesday, not this Wednesday.
Okay, so
It's next Wednesday.
finish it. Okay, so then let me just be clear again.
Okay.
You all on the calendar, what happened to the budget meeting this morning? What happened to that?
There was no budget meeting this morning.
Yeah,
There's a budget meeting tomorrow. There's no budget meeting this morning.
and the reason we're saying this is because everybody kept saying they can't do stuff because they're so busy with the budget meetings. There was no budget meeting this morning.
Well, just to be clear, the council does a tremendous amount of work outside the budget meetings, because as you know, when different departments present their ideal budget, especially with this current council, we don't take their budget and go, okay, you can have that. We dig into their budget and say, are you prioritizing things the way we believe they should be prioritized and all those things? So we're doing separate work from the budget meetings. The next budget meeting tomorrow has 3 different departments,
Yeah.
and that should be a relatively short one.
Okay,
But
but that's my point, and I appreciate you saying that, because all we're asking is that while those discussions are happening about talk about priorities and making sure things happen the way they need to, we are saying that Gordon Plaza needs to be woven into those discussions, because tomorrow is not gonna be, like, sometimes we be in here from 9 to 4 PM and stuff. So we're saying that Gordon Plaza needs to be a priority in these discussions when we leave here and through tomorrow, to make sure going into Wednesday, those things are resolved. Because it's not gonna make us feel any more peaceful if all of the legal people involved in this have not been able to work through what they need to on the front end.
no, I
That's fair.
I appreciate that. I do think that as far as the piece dealing with relocation, we will have movement on that, and significant movement before the full council meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, so let's keep moving. Here's some good news, CL Montano. If the administration, who I know for a fact, when y'all get together and prioritize.
I apologize. It's next Tuesday, not next Wednesday. I was
The
correct.
20, is it?
29th, the 29th. I'm sorry.
When you all get together and really decide to prioritize something for real, stuff moves pretty quickly. And we are saying we need direction here with this appraiser to get this part together so that all the rest of the properties can fall in line without devaluation and discriminatory practices. So I want to say thank you for being here today, so you could hear what these things are that are being contended with. And we're asking the council members that are here to support that process so we can move forward, because once that's done, all it's gonna take is for Machina to lift her head and say, I can see what's going on here, and we good. The rest of the residents are on the same page because they got the same concerns that she has. That's an easy part. Okay, so with that being said, when is gonna be the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting? We need to schedule it now.
That was my suggestion, that we do the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting after the special meeting, which would be next Tuesday. I'm not, to be clear, I'm not the chair of this. Of this.
Today you are.
There I am. And I have to talk to Councilmember Moreno, but I do think, looking at the calendar, it's a day, because we have the special meeting, all the council members are supposed to be present for the Tuesday meeting. So I do think it would be, looking at the calendar, unless I'm wrong, Tuesday would seem like the most appropriate day to try and get a task force meeting after the special council meeting, which goes on until 2:30.
Okay, so are you suggesting that the meeting be on the evening of November 29th?
Yes, I'm suggesting it be at either probably 3 o'clock on the 29th.
I'm gonna ask the residents to look at your calendars and see if that works.
That's how many more meetings? That's what we need then.
Yes. Tuesday, the 29th at
3 PM.
3 PM,
We can come together.
which means that at that point, and I just want to be super clear, there's no reason why everything connected to the appraisal, which has been spoken about, written about, reinforced, there's not a person on the task force who's been absent or not absent who ain't caught up by now. And we know the ones that sitting on the TV because they're cowards and won't come in the space are watching it from there. So we know y'all caught up too. With that being said, we need this to be resolved before we come back in here on the 30th, because
29th.
the 29th,
29th.
because the last time we had to wait and sit. And then the lights went out and then the police came. We cannot leave here on that Tuesday, the 29th, and these two very basic things be resolved because everything goes forward after that.
I appreciate that. And the goal is to get, speaking for my piece, to get that resolved. The goal is working with the administration to have a letter going through with the specifics of the appraisal issues and saying we need responses to these concerns, actually articulated responses, not just kind of acknowledging that there was a request without acknowledging how you're going to implement that.
The actual resolve, we need to know what the resolve
I
will
think,
be
I think
for steps
a
forward.
significant step that has to be addressed is the land value issue, because I think it's an underlying issue that's going to make relocation very difficult for a replacement cost if you don't acknowledge the land value issue.
We see, here's the thing. If people were serious, so we're just gonna put this request on record. All those conversations would happen before Tuesday so that Machina could already have her new appraisal in hand. And we know it can happen because when we were coming to the last meeting, rather than just acknowledge her, they dropped it in the mail. So Machina should be able to come in here in the next meeting, CAO Montano, with a new appraisal in her hand so that we can move the process forward. Because if we come in again, this back and forth is not productive here. We don't want to have to do this. We want to just be able to say, you've addressed these issues. Can we see that you've addressed the issues? Machina, are you good? Machina gonna lift her head and say yay or nay, and then we will know what next steps are. But we want this to be resolved, and there's a great opportunity to get it right before Tuesday. That's fair.
So if the funds that were allocated for this are retracted, we need to know that.
Mr. Montano, do you have any particular questions or comments about this, or concerns, objections, things that we need to know in advance?
Not necessarily and if I'm being in all candor, I think our challenge will be in our combined effort conversations with the appraiser to address some of those specific issues as it relates to it. So I'll anxiously await that
Okay,
conversation.
I just got a note. We can't do the 29th because there's an ethics review board panel that afternoon. Let's look at a different date.
So what about the 30th?
Let me look right now.
The 30th is the 30th?
30th. Give me a second. I'm looking right now. The 30th is free for me. Let me do this. I know Councilman Moreno is not here today. Let me speak to her. Let's tentatively say the 30th and reach out to make sure that we have enough members present so that it works.
Yeah, what? Oh, do we have another time? You said, what time are you setting it for the 30th?
I don't know. The first is the day we have to do the budget. So
No, we're saying the 30th, but what time? Can we do it early? What time?
Can we do it earlier? I mean, I'm free after 1 p.m.
So can we
So-
do it at 1:30?
Let me talk to
1
Councilman
o'clock?
Moreno. I can speak for myself. I could be here at 1:30.
Mr. Montano, what about you?
I'm looking at my calendar. I mean, I'm booked, but I can move that meeting if it's at 1:30.
Okay, so I'll talk to Councilman Moreno and we will double check to make sure the council chamber is not booked. Because remember, though this is the council chamber, CPC meets in here and everybody else meets in here. I don't have the council calendar in front of me, but why don't we
Who has that? Can we contact them now? Only because the residents got stuff and we want to make sure that we get a time where they can be present. You said November 30th, 1:30, Mr. Montano saying it looks like he could make
You can make
1:30.
it work, yes.
Who has access to the calendar?
Keith's gonna look. You can go back there and talk to the clerk directly.
Yeah, I want to make sure that Mr. Montano, you get a chance to finish what you were saying, because you were mid-sentence and I want to.
No, I was just expressing my thoughts on what I think is going to be the longest and most challenging piece is the conversation on the appraiser and how or if the ability for direction is going to be an option, and whether or not there is more malleableness relative to that issue. That's the thing I would imagine all of us on this side of the table, in conjunction with our law department, will have to address most acutely.
Because all we're saying is that if there's discussions that need to be had, if they could happen as soon as possible, because it's going to take him time to process whatever it is you're talking about, to materialize it. And we have said many times, if he cannot do it by himself, that you could get him some support. He's saying he could do it. We believe it's a matter of choice at this point. So the residents are requesting and demanding non-devaluation and non-discriminatory practices, because when they hear a rationale for a decision made, even when maybe they don't like it, they're logical enough to know, I don't like that, but it at least makes sense. Nothing that has been said from this man's mouth makes sense to justify those numbers.
Nothing.
That's what he just.
We have confirmation the 30th is available at
Okay.
1:30, so we will
1:30.
schedule for 1:30 on the 30th.
Okay, so everybody, the 30th, 1:30 PM, we'll be back here again for the Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting. It's been confirmed with the calendar. We're also indicating that we know that the administration
We'll resolve.
is contending to resolve the appraisal piece. JP Morrell and the council is working to front load in terms of the relocation costs. Everybody has agreed to work together to move it forward. And this is the most days between a meeting to come back on the 30th. So we're not talking about the same things again, but these new things, now that the people leading the charges around these are indicating that they will pick it up from here.
I think that we have heard the message from the residents loud and clear. You want to see movement. And right now there has not been movement, and the goal for Wednesday is for forward movement. So that we have heard loud and clear, and that is what we will work towards to bringing to you next Wednesday, forward movement. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.